Salve, Skipoli. Alright, we're going to take a look at Lesson 40 Grammar. And we're going to start with a couple of sentences that will use things you already know but in a slightly new way. So we start with this right here, number 1. Okay, you guys are all clever enough to be able to figure out video is your main verb. And then in the second clause, vides is your main verb. If we look at video, the ending, we know the subject is I. If we look at vides, the ending, we know the subject is you. Now what's perhaps new in these two sentences is the fact that we have me and te working as accusative direct objects. Alright? The word speculum means mirror. In other words, a thing you look into that reflects you. Alright, so we start with the sentences I see, and it leads to this accusative me. Okay, I see me. Alright, well, what we usually say in English is I see myself. Okay, that makes this a reflexive pronoun. I see myself. It's reflecting back to the original subject. I see myself in the mirror. Alright, continuing that thought, you see yourself in the mirror. I see myself in the mirror. You see yourself. Alright, me and te are functioning here as what are called reflexive pronouns. And that means they're ultimately reflecting back to the original subject. Alright, that's a reflexive pronoun. Okay, now, what we're going to learn about in this lesson are what are called the third person reflexive pronouns. Okay? These are kind of unusual. First of all, they have no nominative form. Alright, I put triple X up there. I know that's going to make some of you kind of get needlessly excited. So let me see if I can add more X's. Now it doesn't mean anything. Alright, so these are third person reflexive pronouns. You can't have a reflexive pronoun in the nominative. Why? Because reflexive pronouns are ultimately pointing back to the nominative. So there is no nominative form. The genitive form of the third person reflexive pronoun is sui. Okay? So sui means of himself or of herself or of itself, depending on what you're talking about. Okay? But it's always going to reflect back to the subject. That's what makes it a reflexive pronoun. The dative form of this third person reflexive pronoun is sibi. So this is how you would say to himself, to herself, to itself. Okay, always referring back to the subject. For example, he gave an ice cream cone to himself as a reward. Okay, that's a third person reflexive pronoun, to himself. The accusative form is normally se, se right here. But sometimes it's this form, say. So the accusative, himself, herself, or itself can be say or say. And then the ablative form looks just like the accusative, say or say. Okay? So this would be something like he watches himself. Alright? They work, or he works with himself, something like that, for the ablative. Alright? So this chart goes nothing, then sui, sibi, say. Or the more daring route, sui, sibi, say. Okay, that's your whole chart. These are singular, but they're also plural. Okay, there are no separate forms for the plural. So really this can mean of himself, or it can mean of themselves. Alright? They are looking at a picture of themselves. Okay, this can mean to himself, but it could also mean to themselves. Alright, they give a reward to themselves. Okay, sui, sibi, say. Let's see this in action. Back to our sentences. Let's look at number 2. Se speculo videt. So we got speculo again, which we know means in the mirror. We've got videt, telling us the subject is he, she, or it. we've got say as our accusative direct object of we det. So we've got to pick a subject, we det, he, she, or it. So let's say she sees herself in the mirror. Up here it was I see myself. Here it was you see yourself. Here it's she sees herself. Okay? But what happens if we have a sentence like number 3? We still have say as a accusative reflexive pronoun. Now we have we didn't, the subject is plural. So this would be they see themselves in the mirror. So note, up here we use the form say, down here we use the form say as well. At this point it's got to be singular because the subject is singular. Down here it's plural because the subject is plural. Remember that these reflexives always point back to the subject. Alright? Let's look at a new sentence. Alright, now we have a genitive reflexive pronoun. Suey here, Suey there. Remember these reflexive pronouns point back to the original subject. So, he has, right, Habet, he has a love of himself. Okay, this himself is pointing back to the original subject, he. So he has a love of himself. Next sentence still uses Suey, the same form, but now they say habent, which means our subject is they. So this has got to reflect back to the they. So they have a love of themselves. Okay, he has a love of himself, they have a love of themselves. Alright, now we see a more complicated use of Suey, Sibi, Say, Say. This sentence has puella as a nominative. Excuse me. It has skiwit as a main verb. It has essa as an infinitive. Interesting. It has say in the accusative and pulchron in the accusative. Alright, so we got an infinitive here. We got accusative. Let's look at our verb. Is our verb a head verb? Skio, skire, skiwi means to know. I know things with my head. So yes, this is a head verb. Okay, so we start with our nominative. The girl knew. Then we insert the word that. The girl knew that. Now we've got to go to our accusative subject. And here we have say as an accusative subject. Say is one of these reflexive pronouns. Okay? Which means it points back to the original subject, the girl. So the girl knew that she herself was pretty. Okay? The girl knew that she was pretty. You can just translate it she if you want, as long as you realize it's talking about the same girl we just mentioned here. It's reflecting back to the original subject. The girl knew that she herself was pretty. Okay? Well, what happens in number 6? This gets a lot more complicated here, right? We have a main verb of intelligent. We have infinitives. That's right, more than one. Kurura and debere. 2 infinitives working here. Okay? We end up with a nominative of liberi. We have an accusative say. Just like up here. Remember, this is a reflexive pronoun. It's going to point back to the original subject. Alright, the original subject being the children. So, we've got infinitives, we've got an accusative, here's our main verb. We need to figure out if our main verb is a head verb. Intelligent means understand. Okay? I use my head to understand things, so intelligent is a head verb. So we end up with the children understand that. Then we go to our say. This is our accusative subject of this clause here. So this say points back to the original subject, children. So the children understand that they themselves ought not to run in school. So So the children understand that they ought not to run in school. All right? How do I know this is they? Because it points back to original subject of children. The reason I knew this was she is because it points back to original subject of puella, which is a girl. Okay? Alright, there's your very quick introduction to sui, sibi, say, say. What I would like you guys to do for tomorrow is memorize sui, sibi, say, say. It's pretty easy. It's sui, sibi, say, say. Remember that it has no nominative form. It starts in the genitive, and it goes sui, sibi, say, say. Okay? And be aware that this can be used in indirect statements like we've seen here. Okay, we're going to add to that concept tomorrow, but I just wanted you to have this much under your belt going into tomorrow. Wale